Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Lesson 15, Sacred Silence, or Why We Take Oaths of Silence, up to and including, in some groups, in some initiated groups, oaths for swearing, ever discussing magic, at all, to anyone outside of that group, outside of that community of initiated individuals. AKA, silence is golden. Silentium est aurum. Here I'm going to go over some of what that actually means, some of what it means. It's all about the sub rosa today. And sub rosa is a Latin phrase, under the rose. You can look it up. Bear in mind that there is a big difference. Right from the jump here, let's try to keep in mind that there's a big difference between silence that is furtive or avoiding or sly, right? And silence that is simply discretion, or the keeping of someone's confidences. Privacy, right? That's a form of silence. Sometimes people have a polarized tendency to perceive even the hearing of the word secret as some sort of negative, clandestine conspiracy. Governments get involved in their heads sometimes for some reason. And they forget that not everything is some surreptitious trick, but instead can be, and often is, something that someone might simply be choosing to be politely private about, right? A lot of the times when we're quiet, it's a choice to be polite. See, there's polarity even in the word silence, or even in the word secret itself. The truth is, most people that maintain healthy friendships are very good secret keepers. You have to be. If you're maintaining a healthy friendship with someone who trusts you, you are an informal secret keeper of the highest degree. Because what's not being spoken to, what they haven't asked you to do, is not to walk up to every single person you come across, stranger or not, and start discussing them and everything they've ever told you about themselves with the first people that you come across on the street, right? But you would never do that. That's just assumed. That's an informal, because they haven't asked you, right? I mean, your best friend never asked you not to walk up to a stranger and give them their social security number. But you wouldn't do that because you're a decent person. Or you're not going to go talk about some embarrassing moment that they shared with you in trust with someone that they do or don't know, because you're not a gossip, right? You're just a person of good character. That is a form of secret keeping. So keep that in mind, right? That secret doesn't always mean sly. Also, let me preface this podcast by saying that I am not currently under an oath of silence, obviously, but I'm not currently forsworn or under an oath that would keep me from discussing what I'm going to discuss here. That is, I'm not going to say anything that I'm under an oath not to say in this podcast or any other podcast. And I'm saying that now just to get it out of the way, because I know I will get that question. I know that in doing this podcast and talking about oaths of silence, that someone's going to ask, if you're supposed to be silent about magic, why are you talking about it on a podcast? So let me just get it out of the way by saying I am not currently under an oath not to say what I am going to say here. So that's why. I know I'm still going to get the question, but I gotta try, right? I get questions all the time, constantly still, about whether I'm a Rosicrucian, whether I'm a member of the Temple of Isis, whether I'm a member of the Hermetic Orders of the Golden Dawn. There's people, right? Like whether or not I'm a Freemason, and people looking for specifics, wanting to know which group I belong to, where my background is, how much experience I have, other people involved, their names, like, and I've said before, not only am I never going to share any of that information, obviously, but not all of it is just to protect myself or others. Part of not sharing that information is it shouldn't matter to you. My path and how I got to where I am now, sharing this very useful information with you, doesn't need to be your path. And therefore, I am knowingly withholding that information of what my background is, what my temple is, what my magical practices are, because you have the right to find your way and find what works for you. And I don't want to influence that or impact that. I still get the questions and I don't answer them, but I'm just reiterating it yet again. Let's get to the subject, the sacred nature of silence. So If you're talking to other individuals, this is one way in which it's very important, silence. If you're talking to other people about your magical practices, your ceremonies, your rituals, if you're a witch, your spell work, your manifestations, if you're a high ceremonial priest maybe. If you're talking to other people about those things while they're in progress or while they're underway, while they're active, right, while you're doing them, then you're giving those people that you're speaking to about it direct access to interacting with and influencing the work you're doing. Magic's forms are mental in nature. So if you tell someone else about your magic, that is, if you give them the energy, the energetic idea, right? Because if you're speaking to them about it, they're now forming an idea in their minds of what you're speaking about, what you're explaining. If you're giving them that idea that you're working with to then take up and work with as well, then you're going to lose control over it. It's going to affect and change the energy and its form, because now they're taking that energy and its form and they're influencing it. They're working with it. They're having some control over it too. If other people's minds are involved in your magical work, it isn't going to work, or it isn't going to work very well. Especially since a lot of those minds, even beyond losing control of what you're doing, which you should want to maintain, because you won't have control over their influence on your magic. So don't talk to them about it, like I said. But even beyond that, a lot of those minds that you're telling about what you're doing, they're going to interfere with what you're doing by offering their own opinions out loud, for instance, right? That's an interference. It's going to affect you. Or they're going to outright block your magic. Consciously, subconsciously, probably both, either on purpose or not. They're going to block it by not grasping the validity of what you're doing a lot of the time. And that's an automatic block to your magic. On top of all of that, by having them involved in the information and idea of what you're doing, you're not only lessening your own direct energy and focus, there's a dilution effect, right? The more people you tell about it, the more diluted your magic is going to be. I mean, also, how focused can you be, the way you should be? How focused can you be internally on seeing your magic through, or directing it, or allowing it to function correctly through you, if you're blabbing about it externally to others, right? I mentioned this a little bit before in another way in another lesson when I talked about how talking is giving information while listening is receiving it. That's very common sense, but it's a common sense we don't always apply or apply well. The exact same thing applies here with keeping whatever magic you're doing absolutely secret and sacredly silent. You can't retain a lot of energy for your magics, the ones that you're doing, if you're giving it out to others instead of internalizing and incorporating it in a focused and directed fashion so that it can manifest correctly, quickly, and fully. Not to mention that on top of everything else, if you're constantly talking out loud about your magic, you're not letting your own magic work. Because by keeping it conscious, you're keeping it from working, right? Set it and forget it. That's how magic functions. You do it, and then you leave it alone, and you stop thinking about it. That is a big part of how all magic functions. So if you're constantly bringing it up to somebody else out loud, you're also bringing it up to yourself out loud. And you're going to stop it from working that way. Now, I know this can come across a bit hypocritical, or it's going to come across hypocritical, because what I'm doing right now by talking about this stuff, telling this stuff to you, is the opposite of what I'm saying. Fair enough. That's accurate. While I'm talking to you about how and why silence is of the utmost importance in magic, I'm clearly not using the power of silence to hone my own or engender my own silence power, right? I'm giving energy / knowledge rather than gathering or receiving knowledge. So yes, what I'm telling you does apply, even in this specific scenario of my talking to you on this YouTube podcast. But I'm making that choice willingly with full awareness of the operating principle I just explained. Most people aren't doing that when they're talking about their magical practices. They're not willingly talking about it. They're not fully aware that they're doing it. and that they're choosing to give that energy away. I am in this instance. And in this instance, I'm all right with it. I am giving freely of my energy in this matter. But I'm not doing it as on large of a scale that some might assume, right? It seems like I'm just talking to the public at large. I'm actually not talking to the public at large right now. You, whoever you are, if you're listening to this, you had to want to find and then choose to listen to this video, right? Even if you didn't want to find it, even if it manifested into your reality for some other reason, you're still listening to it. You're choosing to listen to it. In a very real way, then you sought it out and became part of a select group. And I'm simply giving access to you of what you are already actively choosing to seek. In the same way, someone once gave access at the beginning of it to me. I'm returning that favor in a sense, right? So in that way, I'm really not talking to the public at large. This is really still just a very private conversation, if you think about it. And when I'm not talking about your magical work with others, I'm meaning actual specific ongoing magical workings, spells, incantations, invocations, evocations, ritual practices, ceremonies that you're doing on a daily basis. I'm talking the actual nuts and bolts of your magic, right? Like if you're doing magic, candle magic, for a specific outcome, I'm saying don't go talking about and telling people what exact spell, what exact words, what color of the candle, what time of day you're doing it, for how long, how it works, what the goal or manifested outcome you're trying to achieve with it is. Don't talk about that, because that is going to give others, whoever you're talking about, whoever you're talking to about it, it's going to give them access to changing the spell without ever knowing it or intending to sometimes. Just by hearing about it, they're going to change it. That's what I'm meaning when I say don't talk about your magical operations. That's what I'm really discussing here. Now, in a related but somewhat different way, another reason silence is sacred and discretion is well known as being of central necessity in magic is the technique of ego recognition and incorporation in occult practices. Magic has a lot to do with ascending past many common or normal boundaries. And I'm going to catch myself here, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to say my word usage there is not meant to be negative. When I'm saying common, I'm not meaning that in some bad way, like, oh, it's so common, right? I'm saying just en masse, a large group, most. That's all I'm saying, neither positive nor negative. And when I use the word normal, I'm not saying normal versus strange. I'm meaning normal, meaning normalized, meaning most, the common occurrence. So, if magic has a lot to do with moving outside of those boundaries into areas that are generally recognized as being somewhat more discerning or rare, if you will. Again, not positive or negative rarity, right? Just more rare. It's kind of like Olympians. Not everyone chooses to be an athlete. People who choose to be athletes don't all choose to do the training and dedication and obligation and time, right, to become an Olympian. Not everyone chooses that. And it's the same thing in the occult. It's the same thing with magic, right? Not everyone chooses to have the dedication and devotion to train in magic, in the occult, and to gain an uncommon set of skills, the same way an Olympian gains an uncommon set of skills, right? Not everyone wants to put in the time and effort to gain an uncommon set of magical skills. Few do, right? So it's not ascending as in common people are bad, or the common group that doesn't do it is wrong or bad or less than. We're simply talking about moving from a large group into a smaller group, neither being good or bad. But part of that beginning process to do that, to begin accessing these different types of abilities, these different levels, has to do with the individual practitioner's ability and will to get control of their own ego. We all have one. We all have an ego. And unless you've been involved in some form of occult knowledge training before Magick, Buddhist meditation practices come to mind for me. Because yes, that's one form of occult training, of hidden knowledge training or selective training, which is all the word occult means, right? Hidden, passed to a selective few, knowledge. That's all that means. Unless you've been involved in some form of that before coming to Magick, and you've been doing something similar before coming to Magick or approaching these subjects, then your ego is going to be in full, irrationally, nearly useless polarity swinging glory before you begin magical practices. That's just the way it is. It's going to be behaving that way, right? It's going to, before you start making it serve you, instead of constantly seeking and failing to serve it, that's just the way it's going to behave. That's how your ego behaves, right? That's what the ego does. It makes you seek and then fail all the time to serve it. So Magick is an egoic evolution, right? That you're beginning to move away from that. You're beginning to depolarize. You're beginning to stop that swinging. The occult practice of maintaining silence and or removing the word I, you'll see that a lot in occult practices, right? In different groups as an initiatory type of training to remove the word I from the spoken vocabulary. It's one way alchemical ego evolution can be allowed to begin. So silence is obviously important there for the occultist, the magician, the priest, right? It's important as a means to begin undoing unwanted habits and to begin finding freedom by no longer validating harmful or limiting patterns by repeating them. Talking a lot and saying I a lot, for instance, that when I was saying, a lot of these initiatories have, let's start getting away from use of the word I all the time in daily conversation. Because talking a lot and saying I, having this completely egocentric state of being that you're not even aware you're functioning from, that's a very limiting habit. And the occult is seeking to remove your limitations. Silence is a tool by which to untrain that pattern, that egoic centralization. There is a wisdom far beyond anything an egoic mind can achieve. Silence helps with that. Maintaining silence is a necessity for internal transformation. So in that way, silence is going to be sacred to the occultist or to the magician every time, right? Another way silence is sacred has to do with the somewhat more difficult to explain, but simple enough to understand, concept of silence allowing for secrecy that breeds mystery. Not only in the mind and field of the occultist, where it's this pivotally important function, but also in the minds and fields of those near the occultist. And half the people listening to this likely just jump to some bizarre Illuminati conspiracy theory. Right? Why would you want or need to breed secrecy? Magicians are protecting alien races that walk among us. It's a secret, right? Or Wiccans, they have to hide that they really do have conjugal relationships with some pitchfork wielding incarnation of evil. No. Nope, that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about secrecy, breeding mystery, and mystery being important. When I tell you why magical practitioners, possibly such as yourself, right? You might already be an occultist. You might already know this. You know where I'm headed. But when I talk about them taking, the occultist taking, being silent about the occult or about magic in public very, very seriously as a responsibility and obligation of the highest order, of the most sacred virtue, you're going to have a light bulb moment, right? You're going to have an aha moment, and it's probably going to make you laugh at those earlier strange assumptions, right? Silence allows for secrecy, and secrecy breeds mystery. And that's important because mystery is an experience in itself. It is an infinite and invaluably powerful experience. And you don't have the right to take that from someone else. That's what we're talking about when we talk about silence and secrecy being pivotal to the occult and to be respected. It has nothing to do with strange conspiracy theory ideas. It has everything to do with who are you to take the beautiful experience, the luminescent, the numinous quality and character of that experience. Who are you to take that away from someone simply because you want to talk about it? It might be the door by which someone else accesses magic as well. So if you're talking about magic or explaining it to someone who's asking questions, instead of maintaining your silence by doing your duty, if you're doing that, then you're closing that door in their face. And they might not even have known that it was there yet or that they were asking you to open it. And you are now slamming it in their face rather than opening it for them. Silence is the open door for someone else to walk through if they, as their own freely respected individual, choose to do so. So that's why silence, secrecy, breeding mystery, it's another reason it's so sacred, right? Not to mention that saying or explaining things to people about our own magical experiences can actually impede them from their own, right? Our opinions and experiences are going to color their interpretations of things. And we don't have that right either. We shouldn't be doing that. And it can very really destroy power. Talking about magic in specific ways, it can destroy the sacred value of what you're discussing before you started blabbing about it. If you can't talk, I'm trying to think of another. If you can talk about something openly and publicly, then how sacred can it be, right? How rare and wonderful and important and valuable can it be if you're ready to just talk about it ad nauseum to everyone and anyone all the time, right? So in that way, silence is powerful. Why would you want to destroy, give away, or diminish that power for yourself or anyone else who might have need of it? And we all know that you can't really teach anyone anything, right? Someone has to want to know something before they're going to learn it or accept it. That's just how it is. They have to want to learn. And if they want to learn, they will. They are going to find that door, walk through it, seek it out. Magic both respects and represents that common sense nature of things by its use of silence. That if you're trying to teach someone something, that's exactly what you're doing. You're trying. And trying isn't doing. So don't do it. Just be silent. The occult doesn't recruit, right? This is how my brothers usually talk about it. And it's a wonderful way of looking at it. Anything that needs to recruit probably has a reason to need to recruit. Magic doesn't. It doesn't have to. Last but certainly not least, silence. Rather than being avoidance or information hoarding, right? Or withholding from someone else, as it's so often perceived by ego-based or misinformed non-practitioners. It's absolutely necessary to keeping powerful tools out of hands that aren't yet ready to receive them. Now, I'm not saying to keep them away from people you don't want to give them to, or that the occult is keeping things from people because it doesn't want those people to have it. I'm saying until they're ready to receive it, out of hands that aren't yet ready to receive it. I mean, you should see some of the cryptic links that have been gone to, right, throughout history to keep spells, alchemical recipes, internal evolution, Eastern techniques out of the wrong hands, right? You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Well, or if you're an occultist, or if you know a little bit about it, you absolutely would believe me if I told you just how arcanely cryptic and hidden the occult is, right? That's what it's known for. But I'll be the first to tell you that all of those long, seemingly ridiculous lengths that have been gone to historically and currently, modernly, are worth it. And I think of it this way. It's worth it because a 2-year-old shouldn't be given a flamethrower. That is how I think of it. In the same way, a non-practitioner who hasn't yet gained any of the necessary insight, experience, self-growth, and evolution to wield occult magic shouldn't be handed occult magic. A 2-year-old shouldn't be given a flamethrower, right? They can't lift it. They can't use it correctly. They're going to use it incorrectly, right? That's why. It is important to not do that. It's also important in another way to keep sacred information out of the hands of those who want it purposefully to misuse it. So in one instance, you have, don't hand a flamethrower to a baby. They're not ready for it yet. And in another instance, you have, don't hand the flamethrower to the teenager who wants the flamethrower for all the wrong reasons. Right? Don't do either of those things. Milk for babes, meat for men. That's in a popular occult quote, right? You hear that one a lot in all sorts of magical circles. Milk for babes, meat for men. And my version of that is, don't give a baby a flamethrower. Don't talk about the occult. Don't talk about magic on another level, because your silence is sacredly safeguarding something, either from someone hurting themselves unknowingly or someone using it to hurt others knowingly. And that is very important. Don't give the baby the flamethrower. Do the baby and everyone else a favor. Maintain your sacred silence. Until next time.